He came to a small clinic for treatment. Never thought the doctor was the girl he lost that night. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. As Ethan left the clinic, he felt the weight of his emotions pressing down on him. The cool evening air wrapped around him, but it wasn't enough to numb the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. Lena. She was here. After all these years, after everything that had happened, she was right in front of him again. He had come to this clinic thinking it would be just another routine checkup, but nothing was routine about this. He could still feel her touch on his arm, the warmth of her hands as she treated his injury. He hadn't realized how much he had missed her until that very moment. Her soft voice, her calm demeanor, everything about her brought back memories of a time when life seemed simpler. But now, it was all tangled with regret, confusion, and the desire for answers. Ethan tried to shake off the lingering feelings, but they clung to him like the shadows of his past. He had never stopped thinking about her, even after all these years. She had been his world once, and now, here she was again, but in a different role, in a different life. As he walked down the street, he couldn't help but wonder, was this fate? Was this his chance to fix the things he had broken all those years ago? Or was it just another cruel reminder of the things he could never have? His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking his thoughts. It was a message from his sister, asking about his plans for the weekend. He quickly typed a short reply, telling her he was heading home. But even as he sent the message, his mind kept drifting back to Lena. He had to see her again. He didn't know why, but he needed to. He needed to know what had happened to her all these years. What had become of the girl who had once shared his dreams? As he walked, he found himself outside the very clinic he had just left. He stopped in front of the door, staring at it for a moment. The light inside was dim, but he could still make out the silhouette of Lena through the frosted glass. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should he just walk away and never look back? Or should he go inside, face her, and find out what had happened to their story? The pull of curiosity and regret was too strong. He pushed the door open, the soft chime of the bell echoing in the quiet room. Lena looked up from the desk, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw him standing there. "Ethan?" she asked, her voice gentle but cautious. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." Ethan stepped inside, his heart racing. "I know this is probably unexpected," he said, trying to sound casual, but his voice betrayed his nerves. I had to see you again." Lena stood up slowly, her hands resting on the desk. "Ethan, I don't think it's a good idea for us to talk right now," she said softly, her gaze dropping to the floor. "It's been a long time, and a lot has happened." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. I know a lot has happened, but I never stopped thinking about you. About us. I need to know what happened. Why did we lose each other?" Lena's eyes flickered with emotion, and for a moment, Ethan saw the girl he had known, the girl who had loved him with all her heart. But then the mask returned, and she took a step back. "Ethan, she hesitated, struggling to find the right words. "I'm not the same person I was back then. I've changed. We've both changed." Ethan reached out, his hand brushing hers. "I don't care about the past. I just want to know if there's still a chance for us. If we can fix what we lost." Lena's gaze softened for a brief moment, but then she turned away. "I don't know if I'm ready to go back there," she whispered. Ethan could feel the weight of her words, but he wasn't ready to give up just yet. "Lena, I've spent so many years regretting what happened. I know I can't change the past, but maybe we can try again. Maybe we can find a way to heal, together." Lena turned back to face him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know, Ethan. It's not that simple. Please," he said, his voice full of desperation. "I'm not asking for us to go back to what we were. I'm just asking for a chance to make things right." There was a long silence between them, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, Lena sighed, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the years had suddenly caught up with her. "I can't promise anything, Ethan," she said quietly. "But maybe we can start with talking. Just talking." Ethan's heart swelled with hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. That's all I need." The days that followed were a blur for Ethan. After that encounter with Lena at the clinic, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Every minute he wasn't working, he found himself lost in thought, wondering what she was doing, how she was feeling, and if she ever thought about him the way he thought about her. He knew it was foolish to hang on to something that had been lost for so long, but he couldn't help it. There was a part of him that still believed in the possibility of something between them, something worth fighting for. He had seen that flicker of emotion in her eyes when she hesitated, that softening of her gaze before she pulled back, and he latched onto it like a lifeline. He couldn't ignore it. He couldn't ignore her. It was the end of another long workday when Ethan decided to stop by the clinic again. He had hesitated all day, unsure if it was too soon, too much, but the urge to see her was stronger than ever. He parked his car outside, staring at the small building before stepping out. The sky above was heavy with clouds, the air thick with the promise of rain. He walked to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it, the bell above the door ringing softly as he stepped inside. The familiar scent of antiseptic and quiet hum of the clinic greeted him, and he instantly felt the sense of calm that always came with being there. Lena was at the desk when he entered, her back turned as she flipped through a patient file. She didn't hear him at first, but as he took a step closer, she turned around. Her expression shifted quickly, from professional to something more uncertain, more personal. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Ethan took a moment before answering, feeling the weight of her gaze on him. I wanted to talk. I didn't want to leave things the way we did the other day," he said, his voice steady but his heart racing. Lena's eyes softened, but there was still a wall between them, something she wasn't quite ready to let down. "Ethan," she began, her voice catching slightly, "we can't just pick up where we left off. It's been too long. So much has happened. We've both changed. You've changed." Ethan nodded, understanding the hesitation in her voice. He wasn't asking her to erase the years or forget the pain. He just wanted a chance to rebuild whatever had been broken between them, to find a way forward, together. "I know," he said softly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I don't expect everything to be the same, but I just want the chance to talk, to see if there's anything left between us. A chance to start over." Lena looked at him, her expression unreadable, but the silence between them hung heavy. She walked over to one of the chairs, sitting down slowly. "I don't know if that's possible, Ethan," she said, her voice barely audible. "I've been trying to move on. I've built a life for myself here. I've tried to leave the past behind, but every time I think I have, something pulls me back. And I don't know if I can keep doing that." Ethan took a step closer, his heart in his throat. "I'm not asking you to forget, Lena. I'm asking you to let me in again. Let me show you that I'm not the same person I was. I've spent years regretting what happened. I've changed, too." There was a long pause, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Lena's eyes flickered with something, maybe doubt, maybe hope, but she didn't say anything. Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, worn piece of paper. It was the ticket he had held onto for all these years, the one from the night they had met. He hadn't let it go, not because he thought it would change anything, but because it was the only tangible piece of their past that he had left. He placed it gently on the desk in front of her. "I've kept this," he said, his voice rough. "I never forgot that night, Lena. I never stopped thinking about you." Lena looked down at the ticket, her eyes softening. She reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the paper, and for the briefest moment their eyes met. It was all Ethan needed. He had hoped, and now there was something in her expression that told him maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as certain as she had been before. She stood up, walking slowly over to him, and for a long moment there was nothing but the quiet hum of the clinic around them. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if we can start over, Ethan, but I'm willing to try. We'll take it one step at a time." Ethan's heart soared at her words. He had his chance, and he wasn't going to let it slip away again. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "That's all I need, one step at a time." The days that followed were a delicate balance of silence and small steps forward. Ethan and Lena had agreed to take things one step at a time, to rebuild the connection they once had, but neither of them knew exactly what that meant. Each day felt like a slow, tentative dance, where the past lingered just beneath the surface, waiting to resurface at the wrong moment. But despite the uncertainty, there was something in the air, something unspoken that made it feel worth it. It was the quiet moments, the shared looks, the subtle understanding that they both craved. Lena was cautious, understandably so. She had her own life, her own walls built up over the years, and she wasn't ready to tear them down completely. Ethan understood that. He wasn't asking for everything to be fixed overnight. He was asking for a chance. The first few days after their conversation at the clinic were filled with small meetings, moments that felt both normal and strange at the same time. They started with coffee breaks during her shifts, where they would talk, sometimes about work, sometimes about memories, but always about what had happened between them. It was awkward at first, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them, but slowly the tension eased, and laughter, genuine, real laughter, began to creep in. One afternoon, after a particularly long shift, Lena asked Ethan to meet her at a small park nearby. She had suggested it casually, but Ethan couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement. When he arrived, Lena was already sitting on a bench, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes looking out at the children playing nearby. She looked peaceful, as if the world outside had slowed down just for a moment. Ethan sat beside her, a careful distance between them, but the space between them seemed to shrink in the quiet. "I've been thinking," Lena began, her voice soft, "about how we used to be, about how things were before everything changed." Ethan nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "I've been thinking about it too," he said quietly, "about what we had and what we lost, but I don't want to live in the past anymore. I just want to know if we can find a way forward, together." Lena looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to find something, some answer to the questions that lingered in her mind. "I don't know if I can just forget what happened, Ethan," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "The past has a way of catching up with us, no matter how hard we try to move forward." Ethan's heart ached at her words, but he knew she was right. The past was always there, like a shadow that refused to leave, but he also knew that they couldn't keep living in it. "I'm not asking you to forget, Lena," he said, his voice steady. "I'm asking you to allow us to move beyond it. To make new memories, new moments, together. We don't have to erase what happened, but we can create something new." For a long moment, Lena was silent, her gaze distant. The sound of children's laughter filled the space between them, but it didn't feel as loud as it had before. Slowly she turned to him, her eyes softening. "I don't know if I'm ready to open myself up again, Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I can't keep pretending that I don't feel something when I'm with you. I can't keep pushing you away, either." Ethan reached out, his hand gently brushing hers. The contact sent a spark through him, a reminder of everything they had once shared, and everything they could still have. "Lena," he whispered, "we don't have to rush this. We can take our time. But just know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I want to be with you no matter how long it takes." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for something. And then, slowly, she nodded. It wasn't a promise, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other, and that was enough. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a soft golden glow over the park. As they sat there, side by side, the world seemed to slow down just for them. Ethan didn't know where this journey would take them, but he knew that, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. And that made all the difference. As the weeks passed, the connection between Ethan and Lena grew stronger. Each day, they took one more step, breaking down the walls that had kept them apart for so long. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of hesitation, moments where the past would try to creep back in, but they faced those moments together. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like he was living again, not just existing. Lena, too, seemed to be softening. She laughed more easily, her smile more frequent. It was as if the weight of everything she had carried for so long was finally starting to lift, little by little. They spent more time together outside of the clinic. They took walks in the park, shared dinners at local cafes, and talked long into the night. Some of those conversations were light, others were heavy, but all of them were real. Ethan shared his past with her, the mistakes he had made, the regrets he had lived with, and Lena opened up in ways she hadn't done in years. She told him about the struggles she had faced after they had parted ways, how she had built her life back from the ashes, how hard it had been to forgive herself for what had happened. Ethan listened, truly listened, without judgment, and for the first time, Lena felt heard. She felt understood. It was a healing process for both of them. One evening, a few months after that first meeting at the park, they found themselves sitting on the same bench where they had shared that first quiet conversation. The world around them was still, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting a soft orange glow across the sky. "Do you ever think about that night?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan turned to her, his eyes softening as he nodded. "Every day," he admitted. "I think about it every day, but not in the way I used to. It doesn't hurt anymore." Lena looked at him, her heart swelling. She had known the pain of that night the way it had felt like a wound that never healed. But hearing him say that, seeing the peace in his eyes, made her realize that maybe, just maybe, they were both ready to let go of the past. "I used to think about it all the time," Lena said, her voice trembling slightly. "How everything went wrong, how I couldn't save us. I thought I would never get over it. But being with you, even in these small moments, it's been different." Ethan reached out and gently took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "We don't have to fix everything right now, Lena. We just have to keep moving forward, one step at a time. I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm asking you to make new memories with me, to see what we can build together." Lena squeezed his hand, a small but meaningful gesture. She smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "I'm willing to try," she said softly. "I'm willing to try, Ethan." And in that moment, as they sat together, hand in hand, the weight of everything that had once kept them apart seemed to fade away. They didn't need to have all the answers. They didn't need to know what the future held. They just needed each other. The days that followed were filled with the quiet joy of two people rediscovering each other. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, they were both willing to face those challenges together. Ethan and Lena didn't know where their journey would take them, but they knew one thing for sure: they were no longer walking alone. And that, in itself, was enough. They had both found what they had lost that fateful night: each other. And as the months passed, they knew that this was just the beginning of something new, something beautiful, something that had been waiting to bloom for far too long. As the months went by, Ethan and Lena settled into a new rhythm, one that was slower, more deliberate, but filled with quiet moments of joy. They had come so far since that first tentative conversation in the park, but they both knew that healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey. And they were learning to walk it together, side by side. The clinic had become a symbol of their progress. It was where they had reconnected, where they had faced the ghosts of their pasts, and it had become a place of new beginnings. Ethan continued to visit, not just for his checkups, but because being there with Lena felt right. Their friendship, their bond had grown into something more. Each time they met, they found new ways to rediscover each other, to learn about the person they had both become during the years they had spent apart. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments where Lena would pull back, unsure of how much she was willing to risk. But Ethan was patient. He had waited this long, and he knew that love wasn't about rushing it, was about timing, trust, and shared understanding. One evening, after a long day, Ethan met Lena for dinner at their favorite little cafe. The place was small, cozy, with dim lighting and a quiet atmosphere that allowed them to speak without the world intruding. As they sat across from each other, the conversation flowed easily. They laughed, talked about their days, and shared stories they hadn't told each other before. It felt natural, like it always had, but now there was a sense of depth to their connection, a richness that hadn't been there before. "Do you ever wonder how we ended up here?" Lena asked, her voice soft, almost reflective. Ethan smiled, his eyes meeting hers. "Every day," he said. "I've thought about it a lot, but I'm not worried about how we got here anymore. I'm just grateful that we did." Lena smiled, her eyes softening. "I'm grateful too," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "But I still sometimes wonder if we're making the right choice, if I'm ready for this." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand in his grip gentle but firm. "Lena," he said, his voice steady, "we don't have to have all the answers right now. What matters is that we're here together. We're figuring it out as we go." She nodded, squeezing his hand in return. "I know," she said softly, "but sometimes it's hard to believe that we can actually have a future. After everything that's happened." Ethan's heart ached for her. He could feel the weight of her past, the fear of vulnerability that still clung to her, but he also knew that she was stronger than she realized. "I know it's hard," he said, his voice full of understanding, "but I believe in us. I believe in you, and if you're willing to take that leap, I'll be here every step of the way." For a moment, there was silence between them, the kind of silence that held 1,000 unspoken words. But then Lena smiled, a small but genuine smile, and Ethan felt his heart lift. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, let's try. Let's see where this goes." That night, as they walked back to their cars, side by side, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was enough. They were both ready to take the next step, ready to move forward, even if they didn't know exactly what the future held. They had learned to let go of the past, to forgive themselves, and most importantly, to trust each other. In the months that followed, their bond only deepened. They spent more time together, not just as lovers but as friends, learning from each other, supporting each other, and growing together. It was a slow and steady journey, one that took them through moments of joy, but also moments of uncertainty. But every time they faced a challenge, they faced it together. And that made all the difference. It was not always a fairy tale, but it was their story, and it was beautiful in its own way. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Ethan turned to Lena with a serious expression on his face. "Lena," he said, his voice soft but filled with emotion, "I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you, always. I've learned so much from you already. I just want you to know how much you mean to me." Lena looked at him, her heart full, her eyes brimming with emotion. "I feel the same way," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And in that moment, they knew that no matter what came next, they had found something real. They had found each other, and that was enough. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, but Ethan and Lena's bond only grew stronger. They had built something from the fragments of their past, a foundation that was solid, built on trust and mutual understanding. The healing process was slow, but every step they took together felt like progress. They began to open up to each other more, not just about the past, but about their hopes, their fears, and their dreams. It was like learning to walk again, but this time with someone by their side, someone who truly understood. One evening, as the sun set and the air grew cooler, they took a walk through the quiet streets of the city. The golden light from the setting sun bathed everything in a soft glow, making the world seem peaceful, almost magical. Ethan looked at Lena, walking beside him, her hair catching the light, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "It's hard to believe how much has changed," he said softly, his voice filled with wonder. Lena glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "I know. It feels like we've come so far, but it also feels like we're just getting started." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with the thought of everything they had been through, and everything still to come. "I never thought I'd be here, with you," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I thought I'd lost you forever, but here we are." Lena stopped walking for a moment, turning to face him. Her eyes were full of emotion, the depth of everything they had shared reflected in her gaze. "I never thought we'd get this chance either," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm so glad we did. You've made me believe in second chances." Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand in his. The warmth of her touch, the simple act of holding hands, felt like everything he had ever wanted. "We don't have to have all the answers," he said, his voice steady, "but we have each other, and that's enough for me." Lena squeezed his hand, a small but powerful gesture. "It's enough for me too," she whispered. And in that moment, standing there, holding hands as the world seemed to slow down around them, they both knew that this was only the beginning. The future was uncertain, but together, they were ready to face whatever came their way. They had learned to let go of the past, to forgive each other and themselves, and now, they were finally free to build something new, something real. Over the next few months, their relationship continued to flourish. They went on trips together, explored new places, and created memories that would last a lifetime. There were still challenges, of course. There were moments of doubt, moments when the past threatened to resurface, but they faced it all with open hearts and minds. They communicated, they compromised, and most importantly, they supported each other every step of the way. Their love had been tested by time, by distance, and by pain, but it had survived, and it was stronger because of it. One evening, as they sat in their favorite cafe, sharing dessert and talking about their plans for the future, Ethan looked at Lena with a serious expression. "Lena," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "I know we've been through a lot, but I want to ask you something." Lena raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's that?" she asked, setting her spoon down. Ethan took a deep breath, his heart racing. I know we've only just started this new chapter together, but I can't imagine my life without you. You mean everything to me. So, I have to ask, will you marry me? For a moment, Lena was silent, her eyes wide in surprise. And then, a smile spread across her face, a smile that lit up her entire being. Yes, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, I will. Ethan felt a wave of relief and joy wash over him as he took her hand, his heart pounding in his chest. They both laughed, the sound of their shared joy filling the air around them. The future was uncertain, but they were ready to face it together. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they knew they would tackle them as a team. With love, with trust, and with each other by their side. And as they left the cafe, hand in hand, ready to start the next chapter of their lives, Ethan knew that this was the beginning of something beautiful, something lasting. Their journey wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that was all that mattered. The months flew by in a blur of excitement and quiet moments, and as the season shifted, so did Ethan and Lena's relationship. What had once been fragile and uncertain now felt unshakable. They had both made mistakes, had both carried the weight of their pasts, but they had learned that healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about accepting it, embracing it, and moving forward together. Their wedding day arrived sooner than they had expected, but it felt like the natural next step in their journey. It wasn't a grand affair, but it was perfect for them, a small, intimate ceremony with close friends and family, held in the park where they had shared so many important conversations. The sky was clear, the air crisp, and everything felt right. Lena stood at the altar, her heart pounding in her chest, her hand resting gently in Ethan's. She had dreamed of this day many times before, but now that it was here, it felt surreal. Ethan looked at her with the same depth of love that had always been there, but now there was a sense of peace in his eyes. He had always loved her, but today, in this moment, he was ready to give her everything he had. "I can't believe we're here," Lena whispered, her voice shaky. Ethan smiled, squeezing her hand. "I know, it feels like a dream. But it's our dream, Lena. And I'm so glad we finally made it here." The officiant spoke the words that sealed their vows, and as they exchanged rings, both of them felt a rush of emotion. It wasn't just a promise. It was a reaffirmation of everything they had worked for, everything they had fought for. As they stood there, holding hands, Ethan could feel the weight of their past, of the mistakes, the heartache, the years they had lost. But he also felt something stronger. The certainty that their future was just beginning. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said, and the world around them seemed to fade away. Ethan leaned in, his lips meeting Lena's in a kiss that was filled with years of longing, regret, hope, and now, love. It was a kiss that spoke of all the things they had gone through, and all the things they were about to face. When they pulled away, the crowd erupted in applause, but all Ethan could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat, racing with the excitement of the moment. He looked at Lena, her eyes bright with happiness, and knew that this was only the beginning. The reception that followed was simple but filled with laughter and joy. Their friends and family surrounded them, offering their congratulations and well wishes. Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. He had never thought he would find love again after everything that had happened, but here he was, standing beside the woman he loved, about to start a new life with her. "Here's to new beginnings," he said, raising a glass, and Lena smiled, clinking her glass with his. "To new beginnings," she echoed, her voice full of love. As the night wore on, they danced, shared stories, and basked in the joy of their union. It wasn't the fairy tale wedding that most people dream of, but to Ethan and Lena, it was perfect in its simplicity. It was real, and it was theirs. As they left the reception hand in hand, the world seemed to open up before them. They didn't know exactly what the future held, but they knew they would face it together. The journey ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, but they were no longer afraid of what might come. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. The road ahead was theirs to walk, side by side, and that was enough. It had taken years for them to find their way back to each other, but now, as they stood at the beginning of their new life together, they both knew that every moment had been worth it. They had healed, they had loved, and now they were ready to build the life they had always dreamed of, together. Years passed, and Ethan and Lena's life together became a beautiful story of growth, love, and resilience. What had once been a fragile connection, tested by time, misunderstandings, and loss, had transformed into something unbreakable. Their home, a small, cozy house they had bought together, became a symbol of their new life, a place where laughter echoed through the halls, where love filled every corner. Their mornings started with coffee and shared quiet moments, and their nights were filled with deep conversations, promises, and plans for the future. They had become not just partners, but best friends, always there for each other, lifting each other up through the ups and downs. Lena's once guarded heart had fully opened to Ethan, and she had found peace in knowing that together they could face whatever came their way. Ethan had been the one to help her rediscover the beauty of vulnerability, and in return, Lena had given him the strength to keep going, no matter how hard life had been before. They traveled, explored new places, and made memories together, memories that were free of the ghosts of their past. Every day with Lena felt like a gift, and Ethan never took a single moment for granted. On their 5th anniversary, Ethan surprised Lena with a quiet dinner by the lake, a place they had often visited in the early days of their reconciliation. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the water, and the air was filled with the sounds of nature. They sat together, holding hands, looking at the peaceful view. 5 years, Ethan said softly, his voice filled with emotion. It's hard to believe it's been that long since we started this journey. Lena smiled, her eyes reflecting the same sense of disbelief, but also the deep love she felt for him. It feels like both forever and no time at all, she replied. But what matters is that we're here, together. We've made it. Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. And we'll keep making it, Lena. We've been through so much, but I know that we're stronger than ever. I love you more than anything in this world. Lena squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening with tears. I love you too, Ethan. And I'm so thankful for every moment, every step we've taken together. They sat in silence, watching the sunset, feeling the weight of everything they had overcome, and the joy of knowing they had built something beautiful out of their brokenness. It wasn't always easy, it wasn't always perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs. As the years passed, they continued to grow, not just as a couple, but as individuals. They had built a life together that was full of love, laughter, and the occasional tear, but most importantly, they had built a life they were proud of. And through it all, the foundation they had created, their love for each other, was unshakable. They had learned that love wasn't just about the good times. It was about being there for each other through the hard times, supporting each other when things got tough, and always believing that together they could face anything. And in the end, as they stood together, hand in hand, watching the sunset on the same lake where it all began, they knew that they had found something that most people only dream of, a love that could withstand anything, a love that had stood the test of time. They had come full circle, from lost and broken to whole again, and they knew, without a doubt, that their journey was just beginning.